Just Another Clown Story by J.M.I. Gallagher. Why did I do this to myself? I swore I would never ever do this to myself, said Barbara Bryant under her breath. She stared at the disorienting mass of flashing multicolored lights and dense crowds swirling before her. Did you say something? Asked Jackson, smiling down at her. She was instantly reminded why she had submitted to such a brutal punishment. Jackson Russell was the cutest boy she had ever seen, and she was extraordinarily lucky to be anywhere with him, even if it was the carnival. Jackson was the star football player, most likely to be nominated for Homecoming King, and the object of every girl's affection at Belmont High School. It was a good thing that he was terrible at English, or she'd never have had a chance. She had tutored Jackson for a month to help him bring up his grades, and as a way of thanking her, he had invited her to the carnival. She didn't care if it was a mercy date. No sane freshman would turn down such an invitation. She was getting ready to have the date of a lifetime in the place she hated the most. It wasn't that she disliked the rides, popcorn, elephant ears, or crowds. Barbara Bryant loathed clowns. It all started when she was 5 years old. She had been on vacation at her grandmother's house in Florida. Her grandmother, who was odd by the most modest of standards, loved to knit and was always turning out awful creations. One terrifying byproduct of her needlework was a 3-foot-tall Technicolor clown made entirely out of thick, scratchy yarn. It was a bizarre, inhuman-looking construction and was terrible to behold even from an adult's perspective. The clown sat high on an old brown dresser in a corner of the guest room, the room that Barbara was always forced to sleep in.
"What? You aren't afraid of old Mr. Bipsy? He's harmless. Look here," she said,
taking him off the shelf and giving him a gentle shake and a big hug. The doll's head dangled lifelessly to one side, the flat black button eyes cold and empty.
"Do you know why I made him? I made him to keep you safe always. Just think, Mr. Bipsy will always be around to chase away monsters."
Barbara scowled. The thought of having that hideous clown around her for 10 minutes, let alone forever, was an awful thing to consider.
"Grandma, please, I don't like him." "Barbara, I made this for you when you were a baby. You didn't hate him when you were 3.
She pleaded, a look of disappointment on her face. Barbara hesitated to say anything, feeling guilty for having offended her grandma's hard work. "Okay, you can leave him up there, I guess," she said, quietly devising a plan to hide the clown after her grandma left the room.
"That's better. Good old Bipsy will keep you safe as can be," Grandma said,
a kind smile on her face. She walked over to the dresser and set the clown on top, patting him lovingly on the chest.
"I promise he isn't going to hurt you. Now get some sleep and we'll have a fun day tomorrow at the beach."
She planted a kiss on Barbara's cheek, turned off the lights and walked out, closing the door behind her. The room was dark and musty. Her grandmother's house was nothing more than a large cinder-block rectangle, like most of the older homes in the area. There was no central air conditioning, and the window unit rattled loudly, filling the room with an uneven chill. As she lay there in the dark, she stared at the silhouette of the clown. In the darkness, its features were lost, and only a vague outline indicated where he was. She wanted to get up and put it in a drawer, but she couldn't bring herself to do it. Fear had pinned her to the bed, and though she tried, her body wouldn't allow her to travel the short distance to the dresser. Then, to her horror, she saw the clown move. Slowly, it began to slump to the right, a gradual slide as if making a careful escape from its perch. All at once, it toppled off the dresser, but was caught around its neck by the cord of the blinds as it fell, and hung there like an executed man. It dangled perversely in front of the blower vent. It whipped back and forth. Its legs danced, and its body convulsed in the strong flow of air. Barbara closed her eyes tight and covered her head with the pillow. It was the most disturbing thing she had ever seen in her whole life, that lynched clown flapping in the darkness. When she woke in the morning, the clown was still there, dangling from the end of the cord, but the awful images remained. All these years later, even at 16 years old, the vision of that clown or any clown for that matter, still made her cringe. She had spent the past 11 years dodging birthday parties, costume shops, McDonald's, and certain TV shows just to keep from looking at a clown. She had done some reading and found that there was even a name for it, coulrophobia, the fear of clowns. Unfortunately for her, there was no way out of her current situation. She was stuck entering prime clown territory, all for the sake of being with Jackson. "Hey, did you say something?" repeated Jackson, raising an eyebrow at her pale face. "Oh, nothing," she said, trying to hide her discomfort. "I was just saying that it looks like fun." "Heck yeah, it does," he replied, smiling uncontrollably. "I'm thinking we should do the little stuff and then work up to the big rides. How does that sound to you?" Yeah, that sounds like a really great idea." It was the worst idea she had heard in quite a while, but she'd do anything he wanted, in the hopes that there would be a second date in the future. Barbara's stomach convulsed. "Please don't vomit," she begged herself. The absolute worst possible situation would be puking all over Jackson while they sat huddled together on one of those rickety rides. She closed her eyes and said one final prayer before they walked through the large fenced entryway. Each year, the carnival, or the carnies as most folks called them, would roll into town and set up a mini-city near the center. The police blocked off streets so that they could set up rides, games, and food trucks in every square inch of Belmont. For 2 weekends in October, the town went carnival crazy. Usually it was formulaic and repetitive. It was the same tilt-a-whirl, the familiar bumper cars, complete with the same drink stains as the year before, and all the same impossible-to-win ring toss or shoot-the-duck games. It was as boring as it was gross, a double portion of tacky and filthy. As they made their way underneath the ticket sales awning, Barbara's eyes grew wide, and she clutched at Jackson's coat sleeve. "Oh my gosh," she exclaimed, her face betraying any attempt to cover up her horror. "It can't be." "I know, right?" said Jackson loudly, pumping his fist in excitement as he stared up at the roller coaster as it flashed by them. Barbara was stunned. The carnival had changed, and not for the better. It was bigger, louder, brighter, and to her utter dismay, completely clown-themed. The barkers at every ride were wearing clown costumes. Some had gone so far as to choose Halloween-themed garb with giant bloody grins and scarred faces. Clowns on stilts hobbled by, raining down plastic jewelry and toys for the children. A man in a traditional clown costume, complete with a big red nose and bulbous shoes, was handing out free, clown-shaped balloons to the crowd. "Hey there, sweetie pie! You look like you could use a balloon to cheer you up. Frowny faces aren't welcome in these here places," said a voice at her shoulder. Barbara jumped, startled by the raspy voice, and whirled around to find a living nightmare beside her. It was Mr. Bipsy, or what appeared to be an uglier human version. He was a foot shorter than Barbara and was chewing the rind of what was once a cigar. He smelled of sausage, alcohol, and body odor. He wore dark sunglasses and his face was marked by an uneven tangle of beard. His tweed jacket was second-hand, covered in patches and technicolor patterns, just like the clown her grandma had made. He pushed a balloon into her hands and poked a finger into her ribs while pressing the flower on his lapel. A long, thin line of yellow-colored water sprayed all over Jackson's jacket. "Ugh, gross!" she shouted, letting go of the balloon the instant it met her hand. "You be careful at the carnival tonight. Lots of weirdos around the place," he said suddenly, drawing close and peering around as if someone might be watching. Then he backed away and was lost in the crowd. "What a creepy old man," she said to Jackson, sticking out her tongue in disgust. "I feel like I need a shower. My grandma made me a hideous clown doll that looked just like that freak." Jackson gave her a hug around the shoulders. "Ha! What's more gross? The fact that he squirted me with his dirty flower water, or that he stank of armpits and bratwurst?" Jackson asked, laughing out loud. "I guess they're both pretty gross. It would be hard to decide which one makes me more sick," she replied. She tucked her arm under his. "Well, what should we do first?" In his presence, she had mustered a newfound bravery. After all, she was too old to be afraid of clowns anymore. "Let's play a game or two before we hit the rides. Who knows? Maybe I can win you one of those giant killer clown dolls," he said, pointing at last year's shoot-the-duck game. which had been plastered over with clown stickers and a new fixture of red lights. Sadistic stuffed jester dolls wielding plastic knives hung from the hooks above. Barbara cocked her head and raised an eyebrow at Jackson. Yeah, that'd be great. I'd love to have something terrifying to sleep with at night, she said, giving him a playful punch in the chest. The longer they walked and the more games they played, the more comfortable she became. It wasn't so bad. It was the same games and rides that she had always known, just retreaded to drum up a little business so close to Halloween. They played a few games, lost a lot of money on the ring tossed, and got mild whiplash on the bumper cars. All in all, it had been a good night so far. As they rounded the corner just past the food trucks selling caramel apples and some sort of unidentified fried meat product on a stick, they came face to face with something altogether different than the bumper cars and Ferris wheel. Set back 50 yards from the usual attractions stood a funhouse. It was dark, almost as if it weren't in operation. But for the lone barker who stood at a large purple podium in front. As soon as they met his gaze, the man sprang to life and began to speak. "Step right up! What a lovely and brave young couple! Come forward and enjoy a fright this chilly October night. Is it fun? Is it a house? Perhaps it's something different altogether. With a boyfriend that strong, you'd sure be well protected inside this house of horrors," he shouted into the thick black microphone. He was well dressed, wearing a classy tuxedo and bow tie. His jet-black hair was parted neatly, and a pencil-thin mustache marked his upper lip. His eyes glistened mischievously. Barbara blushed at the suggestion, and Jackson was her boyfriend. Jackson looked at her and gave her a sly wink. The barker continued to call out to them, inviting them inside. Unlike the rest of the park, the funhouse looked more like a standard haunted house. The weather-beaten gray pillars of the front porch extended up to a massive second story with high gables and colossal windows. Lights flickered behind the muslin curtains, and a soundtrack of screams and moans played from somewhere out of sight. "Come on, let's go in. It's the one thing that isn't clowny around here. That ought to make you happy," said Jackson, taking her by the hand. "I promise I'll clobber any clowns that bother you." He flexed his bicep and tugged her forward. "Fantastic!" cooed the barker as he tugged a giant black lever, topped with an opaque white knob. The front doors opened, and a fog machine belched out a series of clouds, obscuring their view of the inside. "Let's do this," said Jackson, grinning broadly. "Don't make fun of me if I scream like a girl, okay?" "Of course not. If you don't laugh at me when I pee in my pants when a clown jumps out." Jackson chuckled and shook his head. He wrapped his arm around her waist and entered the thick mist of the entryway. As they stepped forward, Barbara took one last nervous look behind her. The barker was there, but his countenance had changed. His formerly friendly and jovial expression was now suddenly serious, almost angry. He stared unblinking at Barbara, long after most people would have broken their gaze. As the fog began to close around them, she saw one last terrible thing. Beyond the podium, walking slowly toward the funhouse, was the clown from before, the one that looked like Bipsy. Barbara gasped and pointed back, but it was no use. The fog was now a wall behind them, blocking all view as the door slammed shut. "Jackson, I saw that freaky clown, the one from earlier that was such a creeper. Do you think he's following us?" she asked frantically. Jackson paused and took her by the shoulders. "Do you know what I think? I think that a girl as smart and pretty as you shouldn't be afraid of clowns or anything else." Then, without hesitation, he leaned over and kissed her quickly on the lips. Barbara gasped and clutched at his coat. All her concerns fell away, and for the first time all night, she forgot entirely about her fears. Tonight was officially the best night of her life. Her friends would never believe what had just happened. She stammered, "Yeah, you're right." She felt disoriented in the best of ways. I never imagined this house would be so much fun." "Yeah, it's definitely the best house I've ever been in," said Jackson as he looked into her eyes. "Let's see what kind of horrors lie around the next corner." Every room was exactly what they had expected. There was a room with a zombie dummy that popped out of a box, and an air horn prank that honked loudly, and an air jet that blasted them in the face when they least expected it. There was a room full of mirrors that distorted their appearance, one set making them fat and another rendering them skinny. There was a room of flashing strobe lights that made them look as though they were moving in slow motion, and a room with a large slide that dumped them into a pit of foam cubes. As they reached the final hallway, they could see illuminated at the far end a light, a red LED exit sign, and there were doors of every color marking each side of the hall on both sides from one end to the other. "See, I told you that I'd protect you," said Jackson. "Just a little bit further and we'll be back outside. How about we go for a bite to eat after this? I'm kind of tired of the carnival." "That would be great," she said excitedly, feeling embarrassed at her obvious over-enthusiastic tone. "I mean, if you want to, we can." "You've got yourself a deal," he replied. "How much you want to bet that each one of these doors will open and something will jump out at us as we walk by?" Barbara nodded in agreement and rolled her eyes. Carnivals were always so predictable. Jackson offered her his arm one last time, and she took it. They began to make their way down to the exit, when all at once the lights began to dim. Just when the hallway was almost entirely bathed in darkness, a red light began to glow all around them. A door slammed somewhere out of sight, and the sound of footsteps clicked along, growing closer with every step. "Ooh, spooky," teased Jackson. "Please don't let it be a stinky old drunk guy in a clown costume." Barbara laughed out loud. From behind them came an almost identical laugh, mocking her. Stepping around the corner came the barker. "Hello there, kiddies! Look behind you at the floor. See that little square just there? Oops, I gave it away," he said, holding a hand over his lips, as though he had unintentionally let a secret slip. Barbara and Jackson looked down. There was indeed a 4x4 panel on the floor secured by a black eye and a hook. They'd have never seen it if he hadn't pointed it out to them. "If you'll kindly jump down that chute there, you'll save me a lot of trouble and mess." He drew a metal club from the folds of his freshly pressed overcoat. "I do love my job, but I absolutely abhor the cleanup process." "Whatever, man. Your funhouse is lame. There's no use in trying to scare us now," said Jackson. "Come on, Barbara, let's go." They turned and began to walk out, careful to avoid the trap door. "Oh, very well," said the barker. "We'll do it the hard way." As they neared the last set of doors, there came a loud sound of a cuckoo clock, and one door closest to Jackson sprang open. A metal ball shot forward from the mouth of a stumpy black cannon and smashed into the left side of his head. A flat, crunchy sound broke the silence, and he toppled onto Barbara, knocking her to the floor. His huge frame pinned her with her back against the opposing door. "Hooray! 2 for the price of 1! I had no idea that your boyfriend would be so helpful," cackled the barker. "Just stay right there. I won't be a moment." He waltzed toward her, humming a merry tune while brandishing his metal club. Barbara struggled to roll Jackson off her. He was heavy, far heavier than she had thought. He was bleeding profusely, and her hands and jeans were coated in warm blood. She felt lightheaded and nauseous. "Get away! Help!" she screamed. Her voice echoed through the hallway. No reply came. The barker took his final steps and stood above her. "You know what? I love the funhouse," he said casually, brushing his ebony bangs aside. "It's by far the most excellent cover for doing all sorts of terrible things. Everybody sees funhouses in the horror movies, so naturally they never assume that it's really a crime scene in real life. People are so gullible. Anyway, I'm going to put you down now." He raised his metal baton in the air and glared at her. She covered her face with her arms, hoping to shield herself from the blow. Unexpectedly, she felt the pain in the back of her head instead of the front. She uncovered her face and looked up. She had fallen backward through the door she was leaning against. Standing above her, drawing a gun from his side pocket, was Bipsy. The barker cocked his head in confusion and opened his mouth to speak. Bipsy spat his cigar stump on the floor and fired 2 rounds into the chest of the barker. "You... how... I..." stammered the barker as he dropped to his knees. He stared at Bipsy in confusion and slumped forward on top of Jackson. Bipsy looked down at Barbara, surveying her condition. She seemed to be uninjured. "I told you this place is full of weirdos," said Bipsy as he unwrapped a fresh Swisher Sweet. "Don't forget to thank your grandma when you see her again. And don't even think about sticking me in that dresser drawer. It reeks of mothballs." He crammed the cigar between his browning teeth, stepped over the pile of bodies,
walked through the exit and out into the night.